everyone, welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Today I'm out in my hothouse, my very neglected hothouse. So during summer it's pretty much too hot to even stand out here, let alone do anything in here. So once the plants get taken out of here and planted into the garden, nothing much gets done in here. So I've briefly tidied up some trays and things like that, but it's got weeds growing out of the ground and all sorts of things, and plants of all sorts coming up that obviously are seeds I've dropped. Now, autumn planting, I'm behind. So our first frost is normally mid-May, so we're looking at sort of 10 weeks away. The dates are unreliable with the weather being what it is now, and we do have shade cloth over most of our garden space. So even though we get frosts, a lot of the plants can sometimes be quite protected from those frosts. We also do have some frost cloth that I can throw over things if needed. So normally I do a whole lot of planting of cabbage, carrot, broccoli, cauliflower, turnips, beetroot, all that sort of thing in for our autumn planting. And I sort of put things off because we were waiting on some more soil and the wood chips for the paths, and it's just been really hot and busy. So because I've done that, I'm now running late. We have the wood chip delivery coming next week, so hopefully we will get into the gardens and get all the paths cleared and all the beds amended next week. So I'm going to start seeds. So the thought is that even if we don't get much out of them, or even if we're going to get small out of them, if I don't plant anything, I'm not going to get anything. So it's still worth doing, even if it's not necessarily going to be a great yield. Even in winter, our weather is pretty good. So generally speaking, it gets cold as soon as the sun goes down, like everywhere else, which is pretty early in winter. And then our coldest part of the day is between about 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. That's when it normally dips below zero, and then it warms up to like sometimes 15 to 20 by 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. So theoretically, the frosts are so short that a lot of things that are frost tolerant are still going to have some decent growth on them, even in that period of time, because it gets warm enough during the day for the plants to do what it needs to do, and then not get damaged by the frost. Theoretically, we have had luck with winter planting here. We actually get a lot more greens and stuff in winter than we do in summer, because everything bolts in summer. So I'm going to do a variety of things today in some seed trays. So I've got these seed trays that I'm going to use today. I have some more on order because I bought these ones this year. I'm still trial and erroring. As much as this is our 4th year here, gardening is such a learning process, and as we've expanded, I've had to alter things, the way I do things, and figure out which seeds to plant in clumps and thin and all that sort of thing. So I'm still learning, but just sharing what we do here. So I bought these seed trays, which have solid trays underneath as well, and they work fine. They're a good size, but they only have these tiny little holes in the bottom. So you have to use a stick to push the plant out, and if the plant hasn't got well developed enough roots, you damage it and things like that. So, and they're a flexible sort of a plastic, which means that they have this tendency to crack. They don't last extensive amount of time, and what I'm hoping to do is find something that lasts us a while. I bought a soil blocker. I have it here somewhere. A soil blocker, but I haven't quite mastered the soil mix to use it yet. So I'm going to put it aside because I'm in a little bit of a time constraints and just use my standard trays. But I do have some more on order that are a rigid plastic, and they have holes in the bottom that are big enough to stick your finger through, which are going to be much better, I feel. And I have hundreds of these square pots that I use to pot up things like my tomatoes and stuff like that in spring as well. So I have a variety. I also have these 6 cells, these 6 cell ones, which I quite like. They are quite rigid and they pop out quite well, and they're nice and deep. So these are good for cabbage and broccoli and stuff if I want to pot them up from a smaller one too, or it just depends on what I'm doing. I'm hoping with this batch of seeds that I'm going to start them all in these small ones, and from these small ones they're going to go straight in the ground. I have insect netting to go over them for the cabbage white butterfly, and so hopefully if I get them out and get them covered straight away, I won't have too much pest pressure on the small seedlings. So once they've got a few true leaves, I'm just going to start setting them up in the garden. So hopefully I only really want them to spend 2 to 3 weeks in these cell trays if I can manage it, because I'm so far behind on time. Normally 4 to 6 weeks would probably be what I'd leave them, but yeah, we're on a bit of a time crunch because I was a bit slack. So anyway, I'll bring it over here and show you what I've got going on here. Okay, so potting mix wise, what I use is, this is very dry, I need to go and grab the hose, but I use a mix of coconut coir, sifted compost or potting soil, depending on what I can get my hands on, and just a little bit of perlite in the mix. I think I'm going to swap, once I finish using my perlite, I think I'm going to swap to vermiculite. It's a bit more expensive, but for the quantity that I use, I think it's going to be worthwhile. I like the idea of sprinkling it over the top of the seedlings when they're in the pots as a insulation layer on the seeds, so you don't have to shove the seeds into the soil as well. So once I get through the perlite that I've already bought, I think I'll swap over to vermiculite. But this is what I use. Now, if I'm potting up things into a bigger pot, I'm not as worried about sifting it, and I quite often add a couple of amendments to it. I have here this is powdered seaweed and some fish bone meal as well, that I can add to my soils. Wafting everywhere. Can add to my soils for some of the bigger pots, especially if I know they're going to sit there a while. So tomatoes sometimes can sit in those bigger pots for quite a while before I get them out, depending on the sequence of other things coming out. Like this year I had some purple sprouting broccoli that was in the tomato beds, and it took forever to finish before I could pull it out and put the tomatoes in, so the tomatoes sat in their pots for a little bit longer than I would have liked. And if I'm doing it with that, then yeah, the slightly more fibrous soil isn't an issue. But for these little seedling pots, I've sifted it all, so it's all nice and fluffy, and just put a bit of the perlite in there, and haven't worried about amendments because there'll be enough in the compost potting soil mix just to get the seeds. We only want to get the seeds started, and seeds of course have everything they need in them to germinate and get their first true leaves. They don't actually need any outside sources of nutrients. They have everything they need right there. So unless you're taking them further than that, then you need to start giving them amendments. So all I do is I grab my trays and I fill them up. I need to get myself a potting bench. This bench is just a touch high for me. Fill it up like that. Alright, then and grab another one. Then I grab another tray to match whichever tray it is that I'm doing, and I just use it on top just to put a little bit of even pressure, push that down a little bit, and then it leaves some little concave bits that I can put the seeds in, depending on the seeds as to where I put them. But most of the stuff that I'm going to be doing today is going to be really fine, so I can just sprinkle them on the surface. You see that, the little indents there. The lighting in here is not real great for me to see what I'm looking at, but they got little square indents that will keep the seeds towards the center, and then I can just sprinkle the seeds on, and I can just use a handful of coconut coir or the soil over the top to give them that little bit of protection and insulation. So I'm just going to fill up probably 6 or 8 of these trays, I suppose. I'll see how many I've got sitting here, and then decide what it is that I'm going to plant. Just found a friend in my pot here, and not even a nasty one, like a a friendly one. I'm going to go and put him where there's some water. Another friend, I don't know if we can get this one in shot, little daddy long legs. So the thing with Australia and pots, I'll just knock him out onto the ground. The thing with Australia and black pots is that we have redbacks, which are quite a deadly spider if you get bitten. And what they like, where they like to live is in the rims of things, where you stick your fingers underneath. So spider sack there as well. So when you have black items, black plastic, whether it's stuff for the garden or it's play equipment or even chairs and stuff, you have to be careful about where you stick your fingers, because the spiders like to go under the rims of them. So you always check underneath the rims before you stick your fingers in there. It's just second nature for me because I've lived in Australia my whole life, but for those who don't live in Australia, it might not be something that they really think about as being necessary, but definitely is here. So the extensive wildlife, both good and bad, has its pros and cons, but you definitely, if you're working with plastic, especially black plastic, need to be aware that the redbacks like to live in those, in between those black spaces or in the rims where you have to stick your fingers underneath. Alright, so the hose head I normally use for doing this has been repurposed to the duck pond at the moment, and I can't seem to find an alternative. So I've got this one, which isn't the greatest. I've turned the pressure right down, but it's still got a bit of a kick to it, so I'll probably have to use a watering can once I get the seeds in here. But I'm just giving the pots a good soak because that soil was a little bit dry. So now the surface is nice and wet, and then I'll put the seeds on the top in that nice wet soil, put a sprinkle of soil over the top and wet it again. But I'll get a watering can or something to wet it again so that it's something a little gentler. Alrighty, so I've got my seeds all in here and sorted. Now I was going to do a seed order and I didn't, so we're going to use what we've got. So this container here is cabbage and carrot. Obviously I don't plant carrots in these pots, they go directly in the ground. We've got some cabbages. So these ones are red acre cabbage. And I generally put 2 or 3 seeds in every square because I have bad luck with germination. Cabbage is something that I've had a bit of hit and miss with. I haven't necessarily done real well with it yet. Like, we've got plenty of cabbages, but not, like, ideally I'd like to have all of these do well so that I could do big batches of canning. All I'm going to do is put a little sprinkle of light the soil mix, and just a tiny sprinkle to cover those seeds, and then we'll water it in. So there we go, 3 trays of cabbage, probably 4 to 6 weeks later than they should be sown, and we will just give it a go and see what we can come up with. Alright, so I've got 3 trays of broccoli and cauliflower. So I've got some a couple of varieties of cauliflower, a mini ball and a standard 60-day or all year round one, some broccoletti, some kailan broccoli, and some purple sprouting broccoli in there as well. That's the 3 on the table. And then down here I've got those 3 trays of cabbages, and I've got 3 trays of turnips and swedes. So I'm going to move these ones down to where those ones are, and then the next lot that I'm going to do is beetroot. Now I'm out of these particular trays that I was using, so I'll probably do them in the beetroot in the 6 cells. Uses a bit more soil, which is vaguely unfortunate, but I don't think I've got anything else here to use. I'll have a look, but the 6 cells will work regardless, so I'll get those done and then I will be done for today. First of all, I need to mix up some more soil. So what I've got here, this is the tub I was using, and this here is my sifted compost and potting soil. Very dry because it's been sitting in here a while. But what I have here is one of these potting trays that caught some of the rain. So I'm going to tip that straight into there and use that water. And then I'm going to tip some of this potting soil into here. May as well use the rest of it, mix it all up. Because this has purposely been sifted for seedling use. And then I've got, this is the cocoa peat that I use. So I've still got a couple of bags here of that. Just add that, and I'm just going to grab a couple of containers of perlite. You're going to have to turn the hose on as well. So, let me go turn that on. This soil will probably be a little hydrophobic because it hasn't been watered in a while. Alright, that should be good for now, and we can fill those trays. I'm going to do all this in beetroot. And beetroot seeds quite often are more than one plant. I can't remember the scientific wording for it, but each little beetroot seed you can get more than one plant from. So I like to cluster plant my beetroot, but you still only want to use 2, at a maximum 3 seeds, because each seed has the ability to make more bulbs anyway. So we only want to aim for 2 really in each of these. Again, I'm not real concerned about varieties. I'm just going to plant them all out, and I'm going to try and just put 2 seeds just like that into every pot. There we go. Minimum of 2 seeds in every slot. Some of them have 3 just because that's what happened. There we go. So there we go. That's all our seed trays done today. Oh, tripping over the camera. Over winter, I'm hoping to get some shelving put up in here. At the moment, it's all very higgledy-piggledy, and each year I try and improve. And anyway, so I will come out here every day and keep these nice and moist while they're germinating. We've got all our temperatures are still up around the 30 mark during the day and not under 15 at night, so all these should germinate fine, should get going pretty well, and then we'll be on our way. So that's it for today. That's all I'm gonna do out here. Let me get this camera working right. Alright, it is I don't know, it's getting late. I gotta start dinner. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so I am going to go in and start on dinner prep and things like that. But that's the main autumn crops done. I'm going to have a look at my book and my planner and stuff tonight and see if there's anything else I want to start. The other thing I will start, and I'll bring you along, I'll probably do it tomorrow. I bought a Mr. Stacky vertical planter. It's the Australian version of the Greenstalk planner, I would say. Australian made, similar sort of a thing. I've envied the Greenstalk planners on a lot of other YouTube channels where they've used them. Roots and Refuge has them, and Living Traditions, I think, a couple of other places. And the idea is that it's on wheels and stuff. We could potentially take it inside during winter if we need to, overnight. So I'm going to see, I've got some basil on the top of that at the moment because my basil was bad pest pressure out in the garden. I'm hoping to at least get a bit more of a crop in the last 8 weeks. I propagated some from the basil that was out here, put it in the top. Still not going to get anywhere enough. The hope was to make all my pesto for this year, and it's just not, it didn't work. Basil didn't work for me this year. So I've got, the top layer's got basil in it and a few things. Oh, there is something else I wanted to plant, some cucumbers. They will get frost damage though, so I don't know if I've really got time to do cucumbers. Unfortunately, I did leave it a bit late. But anyway, in the vertical planter, I'm going to do lettuce and spinach and things like that. I might seed some kale and some silver beet as well out here tomorrow, but I'll bring you along for the vertical planter. I'm going to seed that and give you a look at it, and I also bought an eBay hydroponic NFT system that I haven't put together yet, which I thought again would be good for greens, lettuce and spinach, and that we really miss it, that it doesn't do well out in our in-ground beds out here. It's too hot in the summer, it bolts, just doesn't get enough water while we're still figuring out the drip irrigation. So I think having it in a little hydroponic type system where we're just using it for greens would be really good. So I will put that together as well, and I'll bring you along for that and show you how to do it. So that is our autumn seeds done for the moment, though obviously I've just rambled and discussed a whole lot more that I'm going to do because I didn't realise, but it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But that is how I seed my autumn seeds out here, and the process is a lot more streamlined than it was when I first started, but it's still got a long way to go. So getting there, have some knowledge, not enough. Do you ever have enough when it comes to gardening? I don't know that you do. I think that gardening is one of those things that you learn more and more every year, no matter what. And we're still working on microclimate, still working on which varieties work best out here. The rain this year has been different to other years and all the rest of it. But I hope you enjoyed coming along with that autumn planting with us, and I will keep showing you, updating it as we go. We've got the wood chips turning up next week, so hopefully I'll have quite a few videos over the next couple of weeks where we get these gardens looking nice. At the moment they're just so overgrown, it's really depressing to go out there, to be honest. It's just so overgrown that it's hard to even work in it. So as this weather is cooling down, we're going to get all the beds done, get all the wood chips in, put some beds to rest for winter, probably put some cover cropping in for winter as well, and I'll bring you along to see the change in that garden bed, because I'll be really excited to see it as well on film. And again, documenting all this garden stuff helps me as well for when I look back and see how long it took me when I planted, what the growth was, and then I can compare it to my weather charts to see how that worked as well and things like that. So thanks for joining me today, and I will see you again in a couple of days. On a side note, thank you so much for the subs and everything. We've now hit all our monetization goals, and the channel is now monetized, so any ads that you see are now benefiting us here on Our Small Footprint, and I really appreciate anyone and everyone who has helped me get to that point, because it has been quite exciting. See you later.